you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise today to address the question of the carbon tax cover-up, as it's being popularly called by Canadians. The issue at hand is that the government has promised to introduce a nationwide so-called price on carbon that will rise to $50 per ton of carbon. Now that sounds like an academic question, but what it will do, according to Finance Department documents I have obtained and made public, is lead to a cascading effect of rising prices on consumers, businesses, and families. Naturally, these three groups want to know how much they're going to have to pay. That was the subject of my access to information request of the government. The government responded by indicating it had tables that calculated the cost of a carbon tax on families depending on their income. It broke households down into 5 groups, quintiles. 5 groups: the very poor, the middle class, the upper middle class, and then the rich. The only problem is these tables have no numbers. They're blacked out so that nobody can see them. Hence the term carbon tax cover-up. Now we know, based on the admission of the document, that there will be higher prices for consumers, businesses, and families. Higher gas prices, home heating prices, electricity prices, groceries that are shipped by truck and train will become more expensive. People who are low income will pay disproportionately more because the items taxed form a larger share of their household budgets. Rural people and remote residents will pay more because they have to travel longer distances, and in some cases they have longer and colder winters for which they must heat their homes. The question is, how much more will they have to pay? Now, there are some people who support carbon taxes, and that's their right. But most of those people claim that they want carbon taxes to be revenue neutral. That is to say that any new taxes Canadians will pay would theoretically be returned to them through offsetting tax reductions. Some say, for example, income taxes could be reduced. The old saying is, we will tax what you burn, not what you earn. Others say, give it back in the form of rebates or just checks in the mail. But to know whether or not a family is experiencing a net cost as a result of the carbon tax, we need to know what they're paying for it in the first place. If, for example, a family has to spend $4,000 on carbon taxes, well then any government claiming that it's going to neutralize the cost would have to bring in measures to return $4,000 to that same family. This government was elected on the promise of helping the middle class. But if the middle class is paying more in carbon taxes than getting back in benefits, then the government is doing the opposite of helping. It's harming the middle class. And therefore, in order to determine which it is, we ask the government to be open and transparent, as they also promised during the election, and release these documents unredacted for all eyes to see. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. And I'm here this evening to give a response to the question that had been asked regarding employment, and I'm going to continue forward. Monsieur le Président, our government has been implementing its bold plan to strengthening the middle class and those that are working hard to join it, actually for ordinary Canadians. And we know it's working. Here are the facts, Mr. Speaker. Job growth is the best it's ever been in over a decade. The last 6 months were Canada's best 6-month stretch since 2002. In our first full year in office, the government created more jobs than the previous government did in 2013, in 2014, and in fact, in 2015. For the most recent labour force survey this past January, employment rose, Mr. Speaker, by 48,300, following a gain of 46,100 in December. Mr. Speaker, these employment gains were well above market expectations. This is the fifth gain in the last 6 months and continues the strong trend of 2016. But, Mr. Speaker, we know there is still more to do. We will continue to invest in families and in communities to help the middle class today and build a sustainable future for the entire country, Mr. Speaker.
I think we just witnessed the problem, the lack of transparency with this government. I asked a question about revealing government data on the cost of the carbon tax to the average person and family. And this member stood up and read a totally unrelated speech provided to her by a minister's office or probably by the PMO, because either she doesn't have an answer or she's afraid to provide the one that she has. The reality is Canadians are suffering. Just last week, we had, just this week, an elderly man said he's giving up his home and his truck because he can't afford to pay for the heat and the fuel. Meanwhile, the carbon taxes that he will pay will help millionaires get rebates to purchase $150,000 electric cars. And this member, who's supposed to speak on behalf of the government, can't even address his concern or explain why her government is covering up the costs. Why is that, Mr. Speaker?
Madame la secrétaire parlementaire.
Encore une fois, Monsieur le Président, je vais faire la réponse à la question qui m'avait été demandée et préparée pour ce soir. I am happy to say that I do not share my honourable colleagues' pessimism with regards to Canada's workforce. Canadians are among the most highly educated people in the world, placing at the top of all members of the Organization for the Economic Cooperation and Development, or better known as the OECD, for post-secondary attainments. More than half of Canadian adults have a post-secondary education or degree, Mr. Speaker. We are world-renowned for scientific research and discovery and can often be found on the cutting edge of clean technologies emerging right now on the world stage. We have abundant natural resources, outmatched only by our greatest resource, and that is our people, Mr. Speaker. And I think I have made it abundantly clear that we are making effective targeted investments to that continue to unleash their full potential and, in turn, Canada's full potential. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président.